Hello and welcome to my January and February wrap-up. If you're like, dude, why are you doing a January and February wrap-up combined? Well, I started doing this on TikTok because I don't read very many books. I read probably like between 4 to 8 books a month. Those are good months too. So I started combining 2 months at a time, and so I would only put out like 6 wrap-ups as opposed to 12. I didn't mean to do that over here because I had read a decent amount of books, but the video I recorded got corrupted. So, boom, all my notes, because I tend to forget about what I'm talking about and the order in which I need to discuss them. So, oh geez. Let's start with January stack because I already filmed this. So, in January, I read a total of 8 books, 1,160 pages, and about 31.25 hours of audiobooks. I read 5 physical books, 2 audiobooks, and 1 ebook, which I then bought the physical book of. I had an average star rating of 3.9 because I'm trying to be more intentional with what I'm reading. In January, I did a really good job of getting through a chunk of my physical manga and some of my physical books, but then I added 1, or 2. Now, before I get into telling you guys what these books are about, I just want to make sure that you guys know that all of my reviews, all of my star ratings, my content warnings, disclaimers, and even some spoilers are on Storygraph. The spoilers are hidden with their little text bracket, but all of that information is usually on Storygraph. I spend time backdating a lot of my reviews, and a lot of books that I read, I don't review immediately, but I try and get all of those up there. So if I don't put them in this video, if I don't talk about them, they're definitely there, and Storygraph is down below. I started the year off with I'll Never Be Your Crown Princess Volume 2. I read Volume 1 last year, and I kind of loved it. It was hilarious that I picked up Volume 2. So I can't really tell you what this one's about, but I can tell you what the series is about. This is a romantic isekai, which basically means our character died in like our world and was reborn into like a different world, usually like a fantasy world. And in this world, polygamy and polyamorous marriages and harems are very, very common. And she's like, I'm not about that jazz. Not at all. I don't want to get married. But she's already betrothed to the crown prince. And she decides that she's going to sabotage her wedding. Only does she know that the sabotage doesn't work until it's too late. It was hilarious. The first one was so funny that I was like, I definitely need to read Volume 2. So I got it and I read it. It's hilarious. Volume 3 doesn't come out until August, the last time I checked. So I read this in January. It's great for me. It is spicy. It does have a older teen, 17 plus, and like parent advisory warning on the back of it. Then, because I felt like I didn't really want to keep reading, and I just picked up another manga that was Volume 2, I read Outbride Volume 2. This is Beauty and the Beast. This is a why choose romance, kind of. It's also an isekai, so same thing as our first one, except in this one, our main character wakes up like 2,000 years into like a fantasy world, and she's the only human alive, and she has 6 rulers. I think there's also a non-binary character. I can't remember. She just has like 6 rulers that are like, hey, you should have my kid, basically, or we should have a kid together, so my land could be the strongest. And all 6 of them keep telling her this, and she's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. I want to leave. How she's like, this is just a dream. None of this is real. None of this makes sense. She's completely delusional. She's just like, no, I don't have to do this. I thought the first one was hilarious. It was also spicy. And you know how we all have our favorites and like why choose romances? I have my favorite. But the ending of this one made me think that maybe he shouldn't be my favorite. But I have my favorite. Heavy trigger if you make it through Volume 1 and you're like, yeah, I want to read it. This one does start off with a potential essay scene, and I almost DNF'd it because of that. I did not like it. This little angel character, I don't like him at all. He's not my favorite. He's very immature, but I do know that like each one of them is gonna get their own like book, their own moment with her, and I didn't like him. And the last manga that I read, which I am kicking myself for picking this up and not checking when Volume 2 comes out, because I have to wait, I think, until June or July, which I know waiting for manga to come out is very, very normal, but I'm impatient, and I don't read series until they're all done, or at least like a good chunk of the way published. So I just thought this was like a one shot, or volume 2 was gonna come out soon. Wrong I was. I picked up Yakuza and Stray Kitten. This one was so funny. It's absolutely adorable. You follow our main character Saba, who is the stray kitten. I don't even think you can see him. You follow Saba, and he is on the streets. It's cold, it's wet, and this random yakuza guy comes up, and he's like, oh my goodness, who would leave a cat out here in the rain? But if you've ever seen like Way of the House Husband, or if you've ever read it, or anything that has to do with the yakuza, like very scary, like portrayed even in like comedy. So he's looking at this like guy walking up to him. He's like, I'm gonna die. I'm a kitten. My life has already been too short and too crappy. I don't want to die. Yakuza Jen, he takes him in, and he's like, I'm just gonna clean this kitten up. I'm gonna be so sweet and so nice to him. But they can't communicate. They don't understand what's going on. Jen's just like, let me take care of you, Tiny Cat. And Tiny Cat's just like, absolutely not. You're gonna kill me. It was hilarious. It was so cute. The perfect slice of life to like anything. If you're looking for a palate cleanser, if you're looking for something to make you laugh, I would pick up Yakuza and Stray Kitten. Coffee break. Now let's get into the novels that I read. I have a mix of fantasy, thriller, and romance. Coming in at a 3-star is No Accident by Lauren Bates. I enjoyed the first 75% of this book because it was so good. It was the perfect thriller, the perfect what's going on here. Wait, maybe I should talk about what this book is about. This is a YA thriller that follows 7 teenagers who are stranded on an island after their plane has crashed. And they're on this island for about 2 weeks. They're trying to figure out if they're going to get rescued, who will find them, and then accidents start happening around them. It gets wild through this book, and I really, really loved it because the thriller aspect of it, the overarching, like, what's going on here, was so good. It reminded me of The Wilds, actually. Next up, 3.5 stars, I got an arc of A Heart to Hold by Sula Sullivan. I got this in December, the day the book came out, and I know that this is no fault of Sula at all, but usually arcs are sent out like before, like a week before the book comes out, even like months before the book comes out if you're like a big publisher. So I didn't have time to read it before the book came out because it got to me the day the book came out, but I did read it in January, and I put my review up. I loved it absolutely so much. It is a magical Snow White retelling that features an all-black cast, a non-binary love interest, and a plus-size female main character. So if all of that sounds great to you, A Heart to Hold is beautiful. You follow Harmony and Apple, who have this courtship, and they kind of like tiptoe around liking each other. Apple themselves is just like head over heels in love with Harmony. They are like, you are so beautiful, you are so talented, you're so interesting. Like I'm gonna like make you my spouse. I'm so sorry. Like I'm going to pursue you. Please be open to that. And Harmony is like, you are the only person I've ever considered giving a chance to. My family likes you, I kind of like you, my friends like you. Wild. Maybe I should. The author does have other books that are coming out, and I pre-ordered one of them. Ta-da! This is artwork. This is Harmony, and this is Apple. It came in a little book box with a bunch of other stuff that I have like scattered throughout my bookshelves, but I kept the art card in here because my goal one day is to just have like a wall of art prints for all of my favorite books. 4-star book that I read in January. I listened to this as an audiobook, but it's from one of my all-time favorite series, so I needed a physical book to annotate, and that is Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. Let me show you. Hold on. I forgot to show you my annotations. These are my annotations for Heart to Hold. Queen of Nothing, those are my annotations. That is a lot. That's a lot. Like, so much has happened. Queen of Nothing is the 3rd book in the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black. I cannot go into description about this book without major spoilers for the first 2 books. So I'm just going to tell you what the series is about. and try and go from there. So the series follows Jude Duarte, who is a mortal girl who, under very violent circumstances, now is living in a Fae world. And her one true goal in this Fae world, if she can never live as a normal human ever again, is to become a knight for the king's guard. Her father figure tells her no, and he doesn't really give strong explanation for it, and so she just goes out the deep end. Like, she starts wilding. Like, I'm talking spies, I'm talking assassinations, I'm talking, like, royal secrets are being spilled. And our girl Jude is not afraid to murder somebody. I don't know what her body count is by the end of this book, but I feel like it's at most 10. 10 people. But keep in mind that this is a YA, a young adult novel. I think that's crazy. But I love Jude. I love her story progression. I love her, like, foils of Cardin and Maddox, who are her love interest and her father figure. I love the story of her younger brother. I love her sister. Like, every bit of the Folk of the Air was just beautifully done. And I started this book series in 2021 to show you the clip that made me take a break from this book series. Don't you think I loved you too much to be used and discarded? Yeah, so that's up on my TikTok. I posted that for right after I finished book 2, and I decided to take a break and to not finish because I felt like this book would do that again, and I didn't want to feel that at all. I just know that there's nothing that Miss Holly Black could do to, like, ruin this series. Like, this is the best YA series I've ever read, hands down. That's a lie. It is the second best YA series I've ever read, hands down. First being Raybearer, and then The Folk of the Air. I am obsessed. Like, I would reread this series so much. 4-star book that I read after Queen of Nothing was Give Me Love by Corinne Michaels. I listened to that as an audiobook, and I don't have the physical copy with me, and I didn't put it in my notes. That's why I forgot about it. But it was a 4-star book. It is so good. It is book 2 in Corinne Michaels' Rose Canyon series, which is like a small town suspense romance. And I've never really read suspense romances before Corinne Michaels, but I really, really loved it. Unfortunately, I can't talk about book 2 without spoiling book 1. You do have to read this series in order because events from book 1 do have an effect on book 2 and book 3. Give Me Love follows Blake and Emmett, and they have been best friends since their time in the army together, and they did a marriage of convenience type of deal. But they split ways separately, and now it is like 5 years later, and they're back in each other's lives, and they don't really want to be. They're very reluctant to give themselves another shot with this romance or even their friendship, and they are forced to work together on what's happening in this small town, and that also gives them time to work on the relationship. I will say that I really, really loved book 1 in this series, and I loved book 2 because it was like a perfect balance of thriller and the romance. Like, when one was going, I was interested, but then it would switch to another part and I would still be interested. Oh my goodness, I loved it. Cannot believe I almost forgot to talk about it. Actually, there is one thing I do want to talk about, and that's a slight spoiler. Emmett decided to just, like, create this entire plan for himself and for Blake to kind of draw out the bad guy. When they did that plan, and then, you know, it worked, and he revealed what he did, if I were Blakely, I would have gone absolutely bananas. Like, that is my worst fear in the world, sir. And you made it come true? You made me believe that this was the truth that I was living in? Like, this was reality? I cried. I literally cried tears. Back to whatever I was talking about. The final book that I read for January, but that was a 5-star, that was magnificent, was That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. I have had this on my list for a little bit, and I read Mistletoe in December, which is book 1.5, This is book 1. I read book 1.5. I was very confused, but I still loved it. So I figured, let me go back and read this one. I buddy read it with my best friend. We had such a great time. I want to say Carrie Can Reach just did a cozy fantasy video where she talks about this book, and I was like, man, how do I describe this book in the best way possible? And she described it as like this cozy journey fantasy with like, you know, a hot demon comes to your town and you have to like overthrow your religious government and all of these things. So it's medium stakes cozy fantasy, and like you have that tension of it, but about 60% of the way through it does just become absolute smut city. Like those tabs at first were like adventurous haha banter things, but then it's just wild. Like it goes from like 0 to 100. So good though. And I had only ever been told that this book is funny, never been told it's spicy. I've been told it's funny. And so when I got to that point, I was like, this is new. Main character, I believe her name is Cinnamon Hot Pepper, and she is a little cinnamon farmer. And one night she is drunk, stumbling home from a festival. She runs into a demon, and he's like, I might kill you. So she runs home, and she lives on a cinnamon farm. So she runs through a field of cinnamon, and he gets caught in the cinnamon part, and he kind of like wakes up from this trance, and he's like, oh, how cool. Cinnamon like nullifies the spell that I'm under. You're gonna help me break this spell. And she's like, I just wanted a cat. I just wanted to live my little cinnamon farmer life. Please leave me alone. And he's like, no, I need your help. And so very reluctant allies on this trip, but their banter, hilarious. Their chemistry, so funny. I loved every part of it. Even their like intense, emotional, sad moments, really, really good. But yeah, 60% of the way through, smut city. And apparently it's also getting like an adaptation. I don't know how they're gonna do that when, again, like this half of the book is Wild City. I loved it so much. I did read this on my Kindle because it is available on Kindle Unlimited, but I loved it so much that I wanted a physical copy to annotate. This is another one that I did that with. I don't know why I don't just get physical copies and just start annotating, but because I knew I was gonna love it. February. In February, I read a total of 6 books totaling 1,178 pages and about 8 hours of audiobook. I sometimes will dual read, and so I'll start reading something as an audiobook and then I'll switch over to the paperback. My star average rating was a 4.29. So, like, out of the 6 books that I read, 3 of them have 5 stars. That's wild to me. So the first book that I finished this month was on my Kindle. I was in a little bit of like a romance-y thing because, you know, it's February, but it's also Black History Month. So let's combine the two. I gave 3 stars was The To-Do List, which was a short novella on Kindle Unlimited. Who was the author of that, actually? Belza. I think that Belleza. Like, it was fun. It was 23 pages. I read it in a night. I think I read it literally February, like, 1st or 2nd or something. A married couple who's trying to put some spice back into their marriage. They have Valentine's Day off from the kids and from work, and so they decide to, like, go to a bar and pretend to pick each other up. It is very spicy, and I knew that going into it. It is just straight up, like, 10 pages. It's only 23 pages, so it's, like, 10 pages of them like cuckoo bananas. It's wild. The next book I read, which was a 3.75, it's dual authored actually by Sade Rina and M.L. Preston. I believe those are the 2 authors. They also wrote Kisses Over Eggnog, which I read in December, and I'm like, it's still winter. I can still read a winter romance technically, even though it's February, but I live in a cold state. We just had an ice storm. So this one follows our main character who is supposed to go on a girls' trip to Jamaica and be with her best friends from college and just reconnect over the holidays. And instead, her boss sends her to this meeting that is supposed to take place on, like, I believe the day before Christmas Eve or something like that. And what ends up happening is she gets snowed in with the person she was supposed to go to the meeting with. So, like, 2 different companies, right? So it's her potential boss, but at the moment, it's the guy that she's negotiating with. They had an interaction earlier in the day. They didn't know who either of them were, and they got off on like the weirdest foot. They were like, ooh, this isn't gonna work. And then they meet again, and then they meet again, and then they meet again and again and again. And she's like, wow, the universe is really just sticking me with this man, huh? And it's dual POV, so you get his perspective, and he's like, I was a complete and total ass. Oh my god. She's really cute, she's really funny, she's really smart, and she's really ambitious. It's just really cute. It's really heartwarming. I will say, the reason that is a 3.75 and out of 4 star is because it had not one, not two, but three epilogues. That, oh lord, is so many. The 4-star book that I listened to this month was Coming Home by Kennedy Ryan. This was a novella that she released exclusively on Audible, and I listened to it. It was about 2 hours long. It had the second chance romance with college friends that kind of drifted apart. You know, life got in the way of them having any type of relationship, and now they are coming back to their alma mater for a homecoming weekend like interview press thing. Our main male character has a daughter in college now, so we're in like 20 years that they haven't really seen each other. He's there to give an interview with the love interest, who's a like news reporter for the hometown, and so it does have that cozy hometown feeling because like she didn't go anywhere really, and he traveled the world, and now he wants to come back, and he wants to like settle down and like focus on his relationship with his daughter and focus on his new relationship, or at least like potential relationship. My dog needs a cameo. He brought his little emotional support like stuff, and he's literally just chilling. Okay, so for the 5-star books that I read in February, there were only 3 of them, but that's a lot for 1 month. So let's talk about the novella that I read. I read Cupid's Peak by Lee Jacquat. I believe that's how it's pronounced. I'll put the cover here. And this is part of her Holly Nights novellas, which every holiday, or like every few holidays, she'll put out a novella that features a specific kink during like the time of the year, following 2 characters who were friends in high school, and it's like the one that got away, kind of. They were both too shy and nervous to like tell each other how they felt. So 10 years have passed, they've done their own things. One of them is a professional hockey player, and so for me, I'm in my hockey girl era. I don't know what happened, I don't know how we got here, but we're here. And so when I heard that this was a hockey romance, I was like, give it to me right now. Our other main character is a financial accountant for a really big conglomerate, and so she doesn't leave the house ever. Her twin sister is like, you need to go on a date. I already set one up. Get up and go. You're going to a very nice fancy resort hotel. It was so funny. It was so cute. And of course, it's a novella, so the spice is right there off the bat. Like a 3 chili pepper, because like it deals with exhibitionism, and so they're in the middle of a restaurant, and then they get snowed in to this very fancy like hotel resort restaurant thing. This is the last book I've read this month so far, and I loved it. Another very, very spicy book, which I've seen this blow up on TikTok, but I saw it got a cover change, and I saw it in the store, so I picked it up, and that is Praise by Sarah Kate. It is book 1 in the Salacious Players Club. I believe there's 4 or 5 books in this series, and trust me, I will be reading them. I want the original covers, so that means I have to go buy the original covers, and I don't have money to go buy the original ones right now. But I did pick this one up, and I listened to a little bit of this on audiobook because I was building Legos at the time. And then I quickly decided to just read it physically, because look at those tabs. Look at how pretty they are. But this book is spicy, wild, crazy. The Sarah Kate series is, I guess, like really closely I could compare it to the Holly Nights novellas, because every book deals with a different kink thing. This one obviously deals with praise, so says the title. It is a taboo age gap BDSM romance, which that's a lot of descriptors, but this one did so well on Kindle Unlimited. It got so much traction that it is now published by like Source Casablanca. I'm like, oh my gosh. I picked it up. I was not disappointed. You're following You're following Charlotte, aka Charlie, and Emerson, and they meet in the weirdest circumstances because Emerson is Charlie's ex-boyfriend's dad. Yep. It's a your dad will do type of thing. Charlie and her boyfriend breaks up, and she's like, you know what, fine, good riddance. But they live together. I need that security deposit check. I need half of mine back. I've got to like have that money to live. And he's like, well, I forwarded the check to my dad, so you're gonna have to go get it from him. And she's like, fine, whatever. So she goes. Emerson is this like billionaire who started people who have the same interests as you, and him and his friends went into business together to open up a very exclusive, very secure and safe sex club downtown. So basically the app in real life to make sure that everyone's safe and like has a place to kind of like connect. His whole career, his whole like the way he makes his money and everything revolves around this like sex club and this app. And so when Charlotte goes to get the check, he mistakes her for someone else and like starts up a scene with her, and she's very confused until something happens and he's like, oh, I fucked up. And as an apology, he offers her like a legit job, like a secretary job, not like a sexy secretary, like a legit, here you need to work, you obviously need the money, I feel so bad, would you take this position and be my secretary? But they have like intense chemistry. All connection in this book was done really well, especially because you're handling things like kink and like consent and like a dom sub relationship, and it was explained beautifully, but it's not like a guide to how to get into it or how to start or anything like that. It's mostly Charlotte going through her own journey and researching, and I thought that was beautiful. So a character in this book, her name is Eden, and Eden runs this blog that Charlie found one day, and she was like, oh my gosh, this has everything that I need to know about kink and like resources to find more stuff. And she ends up meeting Eden, and she's just like my idol in front of me. And personally, that would be like me meeting Evie Lupine. Jaw would hit the floor. I would probably die, honestly. I'd be like, so good, and it absolutely deserves the hype that it has. 5-star book that I read, the book that I have made about 2 or 3 TikToks on, the book that I won't shut up about, The Davenports by Crystal Marquette. This book, it's a YA progressive era romance, not a Regency, a progressive era romance. It was so good. Look at the tabs. Peek the tabs. If you follow me on TikTok, you know about this book. I've talked about it. Other people have talked about it. I will not shut up about this book. It's so good. It's one of my favorites. And I have a feeling that the series, because it is a series, is only going to get better as Crystal keeps writing. Because you're following 4 main characters and their different romances throughout the 1910s in Chicago. You have 2 sisters, a best friend, and then like a childhood best friend / maid. I loved every single bit of it. I switched between the audio and the physical book for this one just because I had a lot of chores to do and like I didn't want to stop reading it. So the tabs in here are like literally insane. And I didn't know that it was going to be a series until I got probably literally to the last chapter. And I was listening to it as an audiobook. And I was like, the chapter numbers aren't matching. Something's going on here. So then I looked at the physical book and I was like, oh, I'm almost done. And like, we've had 4 third act breakups, but only one of them was resolved. What is happening here? It's going to be a series. There are going to be more books. I'm so thankful for that. And I'm so thankful that we're going to be able to see our characters get their happy endings. Like I said, I've talked this book to death on TikTok, and I can't really tell you much about what's going on without giving spoilers for all of the timelines. But what I can say is that it gets messy. There's so much. There's a lot that happens in here. I can't explain it. I would recommend this to anybody who's looking for a brand new YA series, particularly like a romance. It's also Barnes Noble's like YA book club pick for February, and I usually read all of the book club picks for Barnes Nobles because they're typically kind of good. We've had some misses in the past, but this one good, top tier, A+. So those are the 14 books that I read / listened to in January and February. thank you so much for like sticking around for that long video. That's all from me. It's a lot of books. I'm gonna try my absolute hardest to contain monthly wrap-ups to their month and to make them short and sweet, because I do talk about most of the books that I read on Storygraph and on TikTok, so you can find me over there. I also post about them on Instagram. I'm gonna leave all my socials at the end so you can find me somewhere else on the internet. And yeah,